kindly welcome Mr. Farhad Merchant, sir, CEO of the Aga Khan Education Service, for the special address. He would be sharing his perspective on how education, technology, and gender intersecting. Sir, please.
Thank you, everyone. Firstly, I just want to thank everybody today. I've had a fantastic day, enjoyed listening to all the research and all the presentations that have been covered through the day. Very insightful presentations, very useful information conducted through these researches. I think a lot more of these are required. I come to you, will be speaking more from a practitioner's perspective. And I think what I'll do is, before I start, I'll just quickly show you a quick glimpse of what the Aga Khan Schools is all about and then talk further. That 2 minutes is actually just a glimpse into what has been, a series of milestones over the years that the Aga Khan schools have been accomplished. I think the start or the genesis in 1905 when the three schools were initially established, these were girls' schools. And the whole objective of the schools over the years has been to cater to the needs of the time. And that's evolved over a period of time. So when we speak about inclusion, it is very important to also consider exclusion. And I think this was brought out in an earlier conversation as well, where we are saying that when we speak of inclusion, let's make sure, and especially gender inclusion, let's make sure that we consider both the genders. I think what this reflects, and very clearly what we've been seeing in terms of data as well. Almost 50% of the population in our schools today are girls, and I think the focus has largely been the efforts taken. Like we've got, for example, a fully girls school in India as well, and similarly those are there in other areas. These are largely catering to places where there are conservative families which effectively do not want to send their children for education. So having a school that is a girls' school in the heart of that community, helps to kind of overcome that barrier of access. And we spoke a lot about technology trying to solve problems. Technology is a tool. I think it's very important for all of us to remember that it's a tool that is going to help us bridge the gap, but solving the problem requires behavioral change. And I think a lot of it is to do with that which we do at the Aga Khan schools. In India itself, we've got about 30 units, including day school, residential schools, hostel, preschools. And I think the focus of the work that we do in India as well tries to cater to the challenges that exist in the different areas in which we operate. So you saw that almost 90% of the areas in which we operate are in rural, remote regions, remote areas. And those are the places where the challenges are, kind of expanded multifold. So challenges of getting good quality teachers, how do you ensure that you are able to provide quality teaching in areas where these are access to them. The students typically travel, sometimes walk 2 hours to reach the school on a daily basis. And they are, even girl children that are walking those 2 hours to get to those schools and to those places. And I think the idea of introducing technology is to address those kind of challenges. So I'll talk a little bit about the various technology initiatives that we are trying to take in order to solve some of the challenges. So for that, it's very important to understand each of these different challenges. So I spoke about access to quality teachers. In those areas, it's very difficult to get qualified teachers, and sometimes qualified but not having the language abilities, sometimes having both but not having the quality of delivery, which is also important. So all these three aspects, how can technology come in, how can it help, how can it solve the problem? And we're working on adopting education technology across the globe in order to be able to address this challenge. And when we're looking at this, we look at it from multiple perspectives. So we say that, where do you not have teachers? How do you solve the problem? Where do you have teachers that are not of that quality that you desire? How do you solve that problem? And so the approaches are different, but the context also varies, because in many of the areas where you do not have quality teachers because they are rural and remote areas, there is also a challenge of having access to internet and having bandwidth, and in some cases having electricity as well. So the idea is that, the focus is where you have internet access, where you have the ability and the bandwidth, and you're able to get, low bandwidth solutions. We introduce those in order to bring in remote teaching approaches, where you have a local facilitator and you have a remote teacher that is coming in and working hand in hand in order to be able to bridge that gap of a good quality teacher. So the local teacher acts as an assistant teacher or a co-facilitator for that learning process. Where internet is an access, a lot of these are recorded sessions which are then distributed, are sent out to the field. So there are processes where this information is downloaded. It's basically somebody physically carrying it out into those remote areas, remote regions. In fact, I was trying to find out a little bit about, how do we boost technology access, internet access across areas. But these are a lot of the, nearly 90% that I spoke about is in the mountainous regions. So you don't have direct line of sight where you can bring in that technology and boosters to be able to provide the internet access to them. So the idea is that, in an offline mode or in a blended mode, in a flipped classroom mode, how do you ensure that you are able to still provide technology solutions to these students where you do not have quality teachers? So recorded sessions that are there, and I think some of you may be aware that, in EdTech itself, you have student information systems where you're trying to track students, their progress through their, so it's more administrative, it is more tracking of their academic performance, it is result analysis, etc. Then you have learning management system, then you have got content learning management, and then you have got the virtual learning environment. So you have various different things, and you have assessment tools, and you have got adaptive learning. There are so many different approaches that are there that, will help you solve the problems, but not all of them can work where you have internet bandwidth issues. So we're looking at offline solutions as well. Identifying a lot of research going into identifying solutions that will, for example, where teachers are not available at all, you cannot get internet access, so then you use adaptive learning, which means that you want something which is offline, that typically based on where the student is today, allows them through that learning journey so that they can get to the learning outcomes that is expected out of them. And these adaptive learning solutions being offline, you also want to be able to track the progress of that child. So how do you make sure that it also has an ability to synchronize with the cloud so that, somebody sitting somewhere in another remote rural area is also able to check the progress, track the progress, and make sure that the child is continuing to learn as per the requirements. The other element of using technology, whether it's for the students or for the teachers, is the motivation and the engagement. So it's very important when we speak about, giving them a technology solution. There is training required. There is gamification that will help if it's a child or a teacher. I don't know if many of you have used, MOOCs, online courses that are there. The typical engagement on that MOOC will help you to complete that course. Otherwise, there is a high rate of dropout. So today there is only about 15% completion of any online course that most people take up. So it's very critical that you find the factors that will motivate that child and complement that with local facilitation. So even though you're giving them, tablets, tools which are offline, for them to be able to do some self-paced learning, a lot of it is the nudging that is required from the local facilitators, from the teachers, in order for them to be able to continue to learn. Because it's very likely that, when just like we tend to get demotivated, tend to kind of lose interest, tend to get caught up with other things, it's the same thing that applies for these children. And you might already be aware of certain regions and, certain areas where we operate, where there is not conservative, but fundamentalist kind of thinking, very radical thinking, where girls are not allowed access to education. So how do you solve that problem? And that's, so that comes along with a lot of the solutions that we are ideating, that we are trying to implement and piloting. A lot of the risk management aspect has to be taken into account. The aspect about the children, in terms of their learning continuity, is also about their qualification. So these are, we were talking about K to 12 students, and maybe 5th standard, 6th standard, 7th standard, going all the way up to 12th grade. And how do they get certified to be able to pursue higher education as well, when you don't have the ability to access a school? So these are some of the factors that we are also looking into, to say how do you and what do you need to do to provide them with that certification so that they can continue their learning journey wherever they go after completion. For teachers itself, there is, aside from the co-facilitation, the online learning, there is a requirement for a lot of this information to be available for them to, it's kind of an online professional development for them. So they are not necessarily, they may be qualified, but they're not necessarily adept at teaching. And yet, based on the kind of diverse locations where you are, you can't get everywhere physically. So the online professional development becomes crucial component of this. Now, you can't do online professional development, just in a synchronous manner, just because of the internet connectivity issues that are there. So then you look at blended learning approaches. So where you have the ability to do self-paced learning, like the online courses that are there, but supplement that with discussion forums, supplement that with online professional learning communities so that they can interact with each other. And they don't necessarily need to have an internet access for that. They work within, like the groups of schools can be in a particular valley, for example, where a wide area network, internet facilities, etc., are set up, where they can continue to engage with each other, focused on the learning community objectives that are there. So whether they are learning English or math, those specific teachers, in a primary section and a secondary section get together and they continue that learning beyond just the self-paced learning that is given to them. So that helps to kind of combine a bit of the synchronous learning with a whole lot of the asynchronous learning, and blending that approach to be able to allow the teachers to be able to achieve their, improve their ability to teach these children. From a children's perspective, virtual schools is another area that we are exploring, which will pretty much create an entire virtual learning environment, a whole system that actually is replacing a brick and mortar school with an online school, But that requires a lot more investment in time and energy. And like currently what we are doing is doing a lot of research of what has worked and what hasn't worked in that area, especially in the developing countries. So, a lot of this works in most of the developing nations. You look at Europe, you look at North America, and you will see a lot of these online schools. In India, you have, a couple of examples, but they are largely in urban areas. Because we operate in rural areas, we're looking at, what is it and what models have worked. And I think the focus is on creating an environment that is similar to what you would have in a typical school. You don't want the child to lose out the social engagement, the interactions that they have with their peers, their other students, their teachers, their faculty. They need to have those engagements, even though they are not necessarily attending a brick and mortar school. So how do you combine that? Now, you may provide some of it online, but it's not necessarily going to solve that. So you need to be able to combine that with, places where they can converge, where they can have these interactions, these social gatherings, exchange views and ideas. But that will also have to be facilitated through appropriate approaches, which technology again can help with. So there are different areas that we are exploring that will address these. I spoke about learning gaps that are there. I think there was a session on what the pandemic has done. A lot of the students, that even 2 years, 3 years down the road are still struggling to kind of cope up with what the minimum learning levels required in the particular grade that they are in. So how do you bring about accelerated learning for these students so that when they enter a particular grade, the teacher is not focusing all their efforts on catching up on everything else that they have lost, and instead focusing on what needs to be done for that appropriate age. So the accelerated learning programs are focused on taking them through the gaps that they have got, very specific to every student, because of course there are certain students that have got the access, they have got, they come from, and we spoke about the financial divide or the economic divide that exists, where there are families that are able to provide them that environment and that continued learning because they have that the facilities and they have the resources, while there are others that haven't. And many of our students across our schools, more than 50% of them are first generation learners, many of them living in one room, where there is an entire joint family that is living over there with 5 children and one device, which basically they share across, and typically the father takes it and goes. So it's very, very, these challenges that were spoken about are actually real, and we kind of deal with them almost on a regular basis. Our girls' schools, are still there, and we still have the challenges of fathers pulling them out of school, grade 7, to get them married. The principal actually goes to their homes, convincing the families to let them complete schooling so that at least they have that base level of education. So there is a lot that goes on beyond technology that will continue to be there. I don't think technology is going to solve the world, but I think there is huge scope and potential for what we are doing, what we've invested in the last 2-3 years, post-pandemic, because online learning became the norm. And we did not want to lose a lot of the learning that the teachers had gained over that period of time. So they had started to use a lot of digital tools for enhancing and supplementing the learning. We wanted to continue to do that when they went back into the classroom. So we actually invested in these mobile tech trolleys, which have laptops and tablets in them, which go into the classroom. And whether the teacher is teaching English or maths or science. So this is not just for ICT and for completing what the ICT syllabus is, but this is focused on teaching the specific subject areas and supplementing that learning, whether you use quizzes or you use tools to be able to enhance that, or online assessments that supplement the formatives and the summatives that you do in the classroom. I think a lot of these are things that we need to leverage more. A lot of it that you've spoken about in terms of policy and advocacy, please keep doing that because that helps us practitioners. Thank you very much.